Welcome to my studio. Thanks for dropping by. Today I'm going to discuss the importance of using shapes when creating realistic artwork. For the piece I'm working on, I needed to take two completely different approaches in my mindset and techniques between the background and the actual subject. First, let's visit the process for completing the background. Since the background is blurred, I decided early on that I was going to use OMS or odorless mineral spirits for blending. If you follow my work, you know I don't often use OMS except in certain instances. This would be one of those times. Most of the background is very dark with speckles of color from reflecting light on flowers and foliage. So my approach to this was actually put color shapes in first, then fill in between with a darker color. My main reason for this was to keep from dragging the dark pigment into the lighter areas, thus creating a bit of mud. Yes, I want it blurry, but I don't want it muddy. I want to keep the vibrancy of the colors. I also kept the first layer a bit loose in order to make sure I had enough balance in my piece. After I got my first layer down, I used OMS to blend out the colored pencil. If you would like more in-depth, real-time instruction on how to use OMS with colored pencil, I will leave a link in the description below on a step-by-step tutorial. The process I used for this was to dip the tip of the brush in OMS, dab it off on a paper towel, then go over the lighter areas, then move to the darker. It is important to blend the lighter areas first so you don't muddy or darken the vibrant areas. The way I accomplish this is every time I dip, I start with the lighter area on my drawing, then move to the darker as I move around the drawing. This ensures a nice clean brush every time you touch the lightest parts of the drawing. Alternately, you could do all the yellow, then the pink, then the darkest areas, but I don't like jumping around too much, so I usually work left to right. Just find what method works for you. After the initial OMS, I let it dry and continue layering my pencils, saturating the color and semi-burnishing as I worked. I only used OMS on my piece one time in the initial layers to ensure pigment was in all the nooks and crannies of the paper and avoid any white spaces. Depending on your techniques, you could use it more than once. Even after the last step was complete, I still found the background a bit odd looking. All I saw were the random shapes that were creating the background. This is important as those shapes will ultimately define the background in the end. Because the subject wasn't completed, it threw the perspective of the background out and didn't really seem to look like much of anything except a bunch of shapes that didn't really have a purpose. That was okay, and I moved past it because I knew in the end it would look fine. I then moved on to the table that the mug was sitting on. Most of that was pretty straightforward as the shapes were already there for the soccer ball. All I needed to worry about was the cast shadow and ensuring the values were correct for the shading. After I was happy with the table, I then moved on to the mug. Now this was super fun to complete, and this is where concentrating on the different shapes is key. In order to get the transparency and distortion, you must focus on each individual shape and not think of it as a mug. Each color has a shape, and in some cases, a few colors and gradients. Taking each one individually really helps to create a successful piece. Notice as I complete the handle, it is essentially part of the background. I continued with the shapes and colors of the background, then used my white pencil to blur it in the correct direction for the area of the handle to create the illusion of see-through glass and the bends in the handle. I loved creating this glass appearance. I kept working on the handle until I was happy with the final outcome, and then moved on to the bottom of the mug. Again, focusing on the shapes to get the reflections from the table and beer. I have yet to really think about what I'm drawing except for those individual shapes. When I step back and look at this as a whole, I then briefly consider what I'm drawing to see if it is coming together, then quickly switch back to shape mode and continue on the mug. Now, this did take a bit of time working with different shapes. I blocked in the main color so I wouldn't lose my map, and then started working on the individual shapes with the various colors to form the beer and mug distortion. Without using shapes for this, there is no way I would have been able to complete this. Thinking of it as a mug of beer really messes with your head when the mug itself is a bit distorted and not your typical shape. As I moved across the mug, all of those individual shapes started to come together in what appears to be beer in a distorted mug. Once I was happy with that section, I moved on to the foam and the top of the mug. Again, just using various shapes within the reference and the techniques I explained earlier. The piece finally came together in the end. The mug looked, well, like a mug, and the background then became a blurred background and not a bunch of miscellaneous things. Notice it didn't really look like anything until it was almost at the end, because everything then had a relation to other things in the piece to help your eye and mind make sense of it all. I do use this approach on just about everything I create. This way it helps me to take away the preconception in my mind of what it is I'm actually drawing and just focuses on the shapes that actually make up that drawing. What is your favorite way to work? Let me know in the comments below. I'm Wendy O'Brien. Thanks for watching, and until next time, keep on arting.